Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm convincing you to read The Red Ribbon by Lucy Addlington. This is one of the best young adult books I've ever read. This is a historical fiction novel about the Holocaust. It's set in Auschwitz and it's about a 14-year-old girl called Ella. She is kidnapped on her way home from school and she's taken to Auschwitz around about 1944, although it doesn't explicitly say in the narrative. Lucy Addlington has diligently researched Auschwitz and life there at that time, and she's incorporated some of the events that occurred during this time at Auschwitz into the novel, although they are a fictionalised retelling. It's set in the women's section of the camp, but she has simplified the layout slightly just to make it a bit easier to follow for younger readers. Ella, our character, has a real interest in fashion and she's done a lot of work with her grandmother, learning how to sew, learning how to make dress patterns, and she, makes dresses at home. It's kind of her passion and her talent. And in Auschwitz there is a dressmaking shop run by the inmates in Auschwitz. This is based on a real shop that was in Auschwitz. The Auschwitz commandant's wife, Hedwig Hoss, actually did run a shop like this in which the inmates made dresses for her and her friends, and this is fictionalised in this book and she's known as Madam H. Ella, being 14, would have been destined for the gas chambers as a child, but really races against other people, is quite ruthless in getting a place working at this dress shop because she knows that this is the key to her survival, and she knows that if she is forced to do the hard labour on the camp instead, that she also will likely not survive. And so she manages to get a job here and gets to work in making dresses for this abhorrent woman. During this time she meets a lot of other women who work in this dress shop. There's Marta, who kind of runs the shop, and she's very stern. She tells Ella a lot about survival and being kind of ruthless. Turns out that in her research after writing this book, Lucy discovered that the woman that ran this shop in real life was also called Marta, but she was not the same kind of character at all. She wasn't as ruthless or as much of a negative character. But through the character of Marta in this story, Lucy Addlington kind of explores like another aspect of survival. We also meet a character called Rose, who I think is 15 or 16 and becomes friends with Ella. And she's a lovely character. She's very gentle. She remains quite dignified and posh. She's obviously come from a well-educated background, and she and Ella become friends and end up like kind of surviving this camp together. They come to really depend on each other, and Rose brings a lot of hope to the situation. She brings a lot of levity, whereas Ella's a little bit more survival focused and a little bit more ruthless. During this time in the shop, Ella compares all of the people working there to animals. She calls Shirley a giraffe and Francine a toad. She calls herself a fox and Rose a squirrel. And this made for really strong imagery. I feel like I could really see what each of these women looked like. It told me a bit more about their characters. And I also think it was a really clever writing choice because the people in these camps were viewed as animals. They were really dehumanized. So it's interesting to see Ella also viewing people as animals and dehumanizing them to a degree, but not in such a derogatory way, more in a descriptive way, and also maybe to dissociate from the horror of like, we are all people, and she is competing against other people for survival. There's quite a lot of clever writing in this book, even though it is a young adult book and it's like got larger text. It's quite easy to read. There were literary elements brought in that a younger reader would appreciate, and as an adult reader I appreciated as well. Each of the chapters, the book is divided into 5 segments and they are labelled with a colour. So we've got green, yellow, red, grey and white, and it kind of represented emotionally where Ella was, the kind of level of hope that she had. The colour was also brought into the scenes quite expertly. So in the green chapter there's a lot of different references to green. I think she's making a green dress at that time. In the yellow chapter I think she's making a yellow dress and a lot of elements of yellow are brought in. and really hammers home the themes that she's trying to get across with that colour. And you see the colours becoming more monochromatic as you go through, as things become a little bit more hopeless for a while. Needless to say, this book is pretty harrowing and has a lot of really dark subject matter. It's really sad, it's really heartbreaking. I cried at various points, but there's a lot of hopefulness as well. But our hearts still break along the way. You know, when Ella arrives at the camp, she, was taken on her way home from school, on her way back to her grandparents who she lived with, and she's in quite a lot of denial throughout the start of the book, thinking that she will get back to her grandparents, said that they're just at home, that like they must be worried about where she is, and expecting to, eventually escape this camp and go home to her old life. But as a reader, especially as an adult reader, like that life is never going to be the same, and that her grandparents are likely also in a camp and not with us anymore. And so there's a great amount of sadness and tension in seeing her, not facing this fact, being in denial about it. She uses it to like fuel a lot of hope in the beginning, and on some level she must know, but she almost dissociates from this fact and like can't face it, but in a way that's positive because it helps her to survive. It gives her something to live for. But that was a really heartbreaking element to the book, because you're just dreading that moment where she learns the truth and loses that hope. Another interesting character that this book covers is Carla. She works in this aspect of the prison camp, and she is a customer of this dress shop. She's nice to Ella at various points, especially at the beginning of the story, and it almost seems like they could be friends if the circumstances were different. But her behaviour towards Ella vastly changes at various points of the novel. She can be really horrible, obviously because she is a prison warden of this camp. She obviously has to harbour a lot of hatred for the Jews and for the other groups living in the camp. She dehumanises them, dissociates from the idea of them being human so that she can do her job, as all of the prison guards would have done at this time. And so we see a lot of conflict in her between doing her job and viewing Ella as a real person. And this at times has disastrous consequences for Ella, but I won't go into too many spoilers. In the blurb, Lucy Addlington posits Rose, Carla, Marta, and Ella as kind of the four main characters that we focus on in this book, and they kind of all demonstrate ways in which people survived this kind of horror and the different roles that they played. And the addition of Carla and Marta is very interesting. We also see how Carla's personality and attitude towards Ella changes over time, because this is set over 1944 and 1945. We're drawn towards the end of the war when Germany starts to lose, and it's all looking a bit dire for the Germans and the people in the Nazi party. And so this does come into Carla's character and her behaviour and her like viciousness towards Ella and the other people in the camp. There's also an element in this camp that in this story is called the department store, and this is where all of the Jews and the people who've been brought to the camp, their belongings are put in a big store, all of their valuables, diamonds, books, clothes, everything. And all of the prison guards kind of just like help themselves and choose from this trove. And we see Ella and Rose go here to like pick up fabrics and things like that to use in their dresses. And we see people like Carla and other prison guards just pilfering and picking what they want from this trove. This was based on a real thing. It was called Canada, the Land of Plenty, in the real Auschwitz. And I really like that Lucy Addlington brought in so many real, true elements, but just slightly fictionalised them and made it suitable for the young adult audience. But she did all of this respectfully. She wove in the history with the fiction. She treats the sensitive subject with such care, and she doesn't really like go away from the horror of it at all. It's still appropriate for a young adult audience, but it doesn't dilute the horror at all. I love how well researched she was. I think she studied fashion, 1940s fashion at university, and used a lot of this knowledge to write about this dress shop and about Ella's interest in fashion and tailoring. I thought it was also such a unique perspective to focus on girl that likes fashion and that works in this dressmaking shop. It's not an angle that you see told about Auschwitz or the Holocaust, but it's a real part of the story that real women had experienced. And it's an interesting location where the prisoners interact with the prison guards and the upper class, the commandant's wife, and all of her friends that are commissioning the dresses. It's a weird intersection, and it creates a lot of tension in those that were subjugating those people. Lucy Addlington has an afterword where she explains a lot of this that I totally recommend you read if you read the book. It gives a lot of interesting context. She kind of tells you about Hedwig Koss, who, used a shop in real life. She tells you that she used to bring her young son, and one of the inmates scared him by strangling him with a bit of a tape measure or a bit of thread or something in the dress shop, so that he never came back. Don't know if they strangled or just gave him a fright. But yeah, you can see how interesting those interactions would be, the level of conflict of having to be polite and serve someone who is subjugating you and dehumanizing you. You can see why they would do that, even to a boy that's probably innocent. She even says that the daughter of Hedwig Koss, who would have been barely a teenager at the time where she lived in the camp, went on to move to New York and work for Balenciaga and other fashion houses. She even says that Hedwig Koss described her life living next door to Auschwitz as paradise, and that she had a lot of the prisoners work on her household staff, which is really disgusting to think about, how someone could be so focused on themselves and the benefits to them when they're living next to literal hell on earth. I can't think of a place that would be more like hell on earth than Auschwitz. And for her to be so cut off from it mentally, so dissociated from the horror, to be able to think of it positively in any shape or form is crazy. And it says a lot about human psychology and the evil we're all capable of, because it's easy to think about someone like Hedwig Koss as being evil and other, but I think what this novel does a good job of in exploring characters like Carla is that everyone has some good and evil in them, and that when you're in certain scenarios and you're trying to survive, everyone copes with this in different ways. Some people will stay very hopeful in the face of horror, and some people will kind of go along with the horror and be corrupted by it. And I think that's something we should always reflect on, and we should never forget that this kind of horror, this Holocaust, can happen again. All it takes is for good people to do nothing or dissociate from the horror. So on that note, go and read this book. It's not very long. It's about 300 pages. It's larger text. It's young adult. It's easy, but it's well written. There's not really an age limit on this book. You could read it at 14. You could read it at 44. It's timeless, and it could stand next to The Boy in Striped Pajamas or Anne Frank's Diary or Tattooist of Auschwitz or any of these more popular books about the subject matter. So go read it, come back, let me know what you thought of it in the comments. I've been reading a lot of viral, popular, trendy book talk, booktube books recently. So I thought that rather than pushing out more drivel that everyone's seen 100 videos on, I would try to uplift a book that I think is really good, that is really important, that has an important message, and maybe we can make this book a trendy TikTok book instead. It's fine to have fun and have some escapism, but I think it's also good to read books that really make you think and that help you remember a time that should just never be forgotten. I read this book a couple of years ago now, and it's just stuck with me ever since, and I'll definitely be rereading it at some point, even though it's emotionally a tough read at times. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll read The Red Ribbon. Subscribe to my channel for more book chats, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!